Welcome to another episode of Raise Your Vibe and Heal. Today, I'm honored to share space with a truly radiant and wise soul, Franceen King. She's someone who walks between worlds, blending a deep understanding of human consciousness with decades of experience in personal transformation and healing. Franceen holds a master's degree in community mental health counseling and a PhD in clinical sexology. She's a licensed mental health counselor, ordained minister, and the founder of the Self-Awareness Institute. With over 50 years of experience, she's supported countless individuals and couples on their journey to healing and self-discovery. For 4 decades, Franceen has also been a beloved trainer with the Monroe Institute, where she's created and led some of their most advanced consciousness expanding programs. I've had the joy and honor of attending 3 of her programs myself, and I can personally attest to how powerful and transformative her work is. This conversation should stretch your mind, stir your soul, and offer real tools for your own healing and expansion. So let's dive in. Welcome, Franceen, to Raise Your Vibe and Heal.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for inviting me to be with you today.
Oh, such an honor. And I'm reading over your biography, and it's just such a wealth of experience and education. And I'm really looking forward to sharing your journey with the listeners today. And that smile of yours from the very first time that I saw it on camera when I took one of your programs just radiates so much energy. And I just feel like not only are the listeners going to just benefit from your experiences and the knowledge and wisdom you have to share, but also just being in the presence of your energy. So thank you again for joining us today.
Well, thank you again, Lisa.
Okay.
I'm going to be curious to see what all we talk about today. There's so many possibilities.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There really are so many possibilities. Okay, Franceen. So can you take us back to one of the first moments that opened your awareness? Like when you knew there was so much more to this life than what we're taught?
Well, that's a good question because, as a child, I was always a lucid dreamer. So throughout my childhood, I had grand adventures in my sleep time, including telepathic dreams with my brother, who was 2 years younger than me. So from the time I was 5 years old or so, I had made note of that, how we could have dreams together and do things together and have conversations, etc. And then when we'd wake up during the day, we'd just continue on with that.
Okay. So let's just pause there for just a second. You're 5 years old, you're having lucid dreamings, and you're having telepathic. Okay. Well, all right. So for the listeners who are brand new to what you're talking about, because I understand what you're talking about, could you please educate the listener a little bit about what lucid dreaming means?
Well, there are 2 definitions of lucid dreaming. The classical definition is that you are aware that you are dreaming and able to exercise volition, meaning make choices and choose to do different things, behave in different ways. Now, some people use the term lucid dreaming simply to describe that you are aware that you're dreaming, but the classical definition includes that element of volition.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you have this awareness at the age of 5 that you were lucid dreaming? That doesn't seem like a typical thing that the average 5-year-old would have awareness of.
Well, I did not call it lucid dreaming,
no.
Obviously. I just dreamed. I just had dreams. I remember asking my mom at about that age, how do I know that this is real and what I'm experiencing in my dreams isn't? Because a lot of what I experienced in my dreams clearly had connections in my physical reality. Well, Mom never did have any good explanations, so I just assumed at that age whatever I was experiencing was totally normal. most children are lucid dreamers, and it's not until adolescence that they begin to lose that ability. But for me, that continued into adulthood. Yeah.
All right, so now walk us through a little bit about the conversations you were having with your brother.
Well, they were just simple things, we'd be building something together or playing with toys or playing in the yard, just simple, ordinary kids stuff. But we could continue the conversation where we left off. We were awake.
So your brother remembers these conversations with you?
No, no, he doesn't because he was 2 years younger than me. He was a little younger, but in the moment, at that time, he remembered it. So I had lucid dreams my whole life, and I learned a lot through my dreams. And periodically, there would be slightly unusual things that would show up, precognition. And I know I always used my dreams for study time, and I always just considered that was my subconscious. But for example, in high school, there were several times where I might have a big exam coming up, and I'd wake up the morning of the exam and start looking for my textbooks, and I would eventually find them under my pillow with no memory of having ever put them under my pillow. And I always thought that was kind of funny. I thought, well, gee, I guess I guess some part of me thinks I'm going to get this by
By
osmosis.
osmosis.
So, you know, well, I never heard of that until as an adult, I read about some of Edgar Casey's experiences. And apparently that happened for him too.
Can you explain what your belief system is, why they were underneath your pillow?
So that I could learn the content more easily.
Okay,
But how they got under my pillow, I don't
okay.
know.
Okay, because this is the first time I've ever heard of this happening. I believe you.
Oh,
I completely believe you. It's just
okay.
this is expanding my belief system on how this
Okay.
works. So, okay. All right. Thank you for
Going through high school and college, I did not consider that I was experiencing anything particularly unusual. I did think I had a good technique down for being able to record and recall information that I was learning in school. And I was a very good student, that kind of thing. It wasn't until I graduated from college that my consciousness really started expanding. After college, I got married right away. I married someone who I went to high school with. We dated through college. We got married. I loved him very much. He loved me very much. But after just a short period of time, it became clear that we were headed in very different directions. And it just seemed to me that the easiest thing to do, the best thing would be for us to part. So we got divorced. Okay. And that was a little bit atypical at that time. Divorce wasn't as common. But we got divorced, and it wasn't long after that I met the man who became my husband for almost 50 years. Part of the reason I felt we were moving in different directions is that I guess I was getting those little nudges even then that there was something more that I needed to discover or experience. And, people have dramatic stories about near-death experiences or whatever and how they're awakened. For me, it wasn't dramatic in quite the same way. The big opening occurred when I went to a dinner party one night with my boyfriend who became my husband. There were about 8 people at the dinner party. After dinner, we were sitting in the living room and I felt really strange and woozy and felt like I really needed to go lie down. So I went in the bedroom and laid on the host's bed. And suddenly I found myself out of my body, which was not unusual for me at that time.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
But what was unusual was that I couldn't make any connection with my body. No matter how hard I tried, I wasn't able to connect with my body. So I was there next to my body and I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I'm dying. So this was what these days is described as a near-death like experience. PMH Atwater, who's written a lot about near-death experiences, uses that term. Of course, I knew nothing about that at that time. I was raised Catholic, and I had in Catholicism, you learn a prayer, the Hail Mary, and the end of it is asking Mother Mary to be with us now and at the hour of our death. Amen. And I felt the presence of the Blessed Mother with me, and I couldn't make contact with my body. So I assumed at that point that I might be dying. I just hung out there for a bit, and then it became so clear to me that I couldn't be dying because I was aware and I still existed, obviously. And then suddenly I started moving rapidly through what I call veils of energy, cloudy, slightly colored fields of clouds. And then I'd move through them and it would open, and I'd move through the next one and it would open. I went like that for a while. And then I ended at a point that seemed like an intersection of many, many energy streams where I was able to know all that there was to know, past, present, future, that any human, at least the way I interpreted it at that time, had ever known. And then somehow, not long after that, I began to become more aware of my body in the room and came back. But I said to my future husband the next day, I said, last night I had an experience of infinite intelligence. That's the term I used. And I said, and I'm going to develop my ESP. So
Okay,
I
now
made
these are topics that weren't. These were not topics that were openly discussed.
no,
Because
no.
you must have been what, in your early
I was
20s at the time?
23 or 24 in that.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe 23 at that point.
This is
Yeah.
so cool. This is so
Okay.
cool.
Okay. So I said out loud, I'm going to develop my ESP. And that was the only term I could even think of to describe what faculties I needed to continue learning. The very next day in the mail, I received a postcard from what was then Silva Mind Control.
Yes.
I don't know where they got my name. I had never heard of them. But the way they advertised at that point, they sent out postcards, and at the bottom it said, "We guarantee you will experience ESP."
Oh my gosh.
So I thought, just what I'm looking for out of the blue. What's a strange thing to receive. So I called and signed up for the next available course. So that whole process really accelerated my consciousness expansion.
Okay, you can't make this up, right? I mean, there's one of the things I often talk about on this podcast are signs and synchronicities, asking our guidance system for just big signs, right? And here you have this awareness at such a young age. You have this out of body, you called it a
Near death like
like
experience.
experience, near death like experience, which is
And I
different.
say I say that because I don't know that there was any real threat to my physical body
Mm-mm.
unless something I ate disagreed with me, but it wasn't like normal food poisoning response, certainly.
So, would you say that that was a different experience than, say, an out of body experience?
Well, yes, in that normally when we have out of body experiences, anytime we want to return to our body, we can do that very quickly and
Thank
easily,
you.
and often do even when we don't want, when it's not our clear intention. So, but I just couldn't make any contact with my body.
Do you feel it's because you were meant to experience those different veils of
Yes,
consciousness and awareness, and that spearheaded you into, I'm going to learn ESP? And then, boom, very next
yes,
day, there's the postcard. Wow.
yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Next steps, please. What happened after that? So, you decided to do the Silva
So
ESP
I did the
program.
Silva course,
Okay.
and back then, this was 1970. 1 and 72, they had a policy that once you took the course, you could repeat it for free forever, whenever. So I would take the course and repeat it. But even after that first course, now at the time I worked at the National Institutes of Health. I had gone to work there as a management intern, where they selected talented people and trained them for future management positions and rotated throughout the organization. So I always feel like NIH was my home. I feel like I grew up there. And after I took the Silva course, the next Monday, I went into work high as a kite. Okay.
Okay. I can see
um,
why.
and early afternoon, my secretary, which was the term we used at that time,
Right.
uh, said to me, she said, Francine, I know you took a course that had something to do with healing. Now, she personally had done yoga much of her life, which was unusual, and had some sensitivity to altered states or unusual phenomena. And she says, I'm wondering, you took this course on healing. She says, I'm wondering if you could help my daughter who had fallen in gym class on Friday and broken her arm in 2 places. And it was put in a cast, but it was complicated by the fact that there was a large blood clot near the elbow.
Mhm.
I said, I can certainly do what I've been taught. So I went in my office, closed the door, entered an altered state, sent healing energy, my interpretation of what I was supposed to do. And just as I finished and opened the door, the phone rang, and it was the daughter on the phone. She had gotten off the school bus, and it was snowy outside, and she had slipped and fallen. She had not landed on her arm, but it was hurting. So my secretary was concerned. She immediately called the doctor and made an appointment to take her in, just to have it checked out with this blood clot and everything, to have her checked out first thing the next morning. By that time, the arm was no longer hurting. The doctor cut off the cast to look at the blood clot and everything, and the arm looked so good, he decided to re x ray it, which he did, and there was no evidence of either of the 2 breaks, and the blood clot was dispersing beautifully.
That
Okay.
is so cool.
So, the doctor said, just go home and take care of, be careful. Don't. For me personally, after I had done this healing session and the phone rang, I started having some doubts like, oh, I hope I didn't do something wrong. Okay, that kind of thing. I think, well, no, I did what I was taught. But all of this is premised on a belief that anything I did might have had any effect, which was still a little bit iffy in my mind.
Okay.
Okay, but lo and behold, there's no evidence of any break. And
Wow.
that's just like overnight. It got my attention in the sense that I did feel like there was some cause and effect relationship that merited more investigation. I am so grateful to my own inner guidance team over the years because so often they have presented me with effects which are just irrefutable, for which there is clear physical evidence. And I'm very, very grateful for that because as I've progressed through the years, that's been very, very helpful along the way, especially in my role as a teacher or guide for others, when I can say, I know this is possible, whatever it might be along the way.
Sounds like you just kept following the breadcrumbs. I had a similar experience to you, Francine, where a lot of people say they have their big spiritual awakening as a result of the death of a child or a big traumatic car accident. And
Mhm.
somebody asked me the other day, "How did yours start?" And it just evolved, just like you. It just evolved. And love what you said about your inner guidance system, because when we do our work and when we pay attention to the signs, such as you being guided to take the Silva program, and you're following the breadcrumbs, it strengthens that connection because we're trusting and we're in alignment with that guidance system. And really that's what I feel like a big part of what we're here to do is trusting our inner wisdom and our inner guidance. So, okay, what happened next? Because you have such a scientific medical background, and you're also balancing and opening up to the land of spirituality and inner guidance and inner wisdom, and truly a pioneer, because some of the programs that I have taken as that you've developed are truly just I like to say is mind blowing, just truly mind blowing. So, okay, so walk us through the next steps, please, of your
Okay,
journey.
so the next steps were I started reading everything I could and taking every class I could on anything related. And like I said, I would repeat the Silva course for free. And I would participate. I found a psychic development group that I could participate in once a week or every other week, whatever. Sometimes I would be part of a healing team to go to a hospital and send healing. For a while, I thought maybe that was my big role. I'd have experiences and they'd generate more questions. So, since I had learned to enter into altered states, I had been learning to use those states to ask questions as well as to influence things in the physical world, what we would talk about as manifestation these days. One night, I had said, I'm going to move to whatever state of consciousness will enable me to get answers to the questions I have in mind. In other words, I wasn't just hanging in space somewhere. I seemed to be in a place and that one might even call another planet, although I think it was interdimensional. And in this place, there were some very nice beings who greeted me, and they were in hooded robes, so I couldn't see them too clearly, although I could feel their very strong radiation of joy and gratitude that I was there and eager to meet me. They took me into a building and sat me down with one particular being who was really trying to provide me with some of the answers. My telepathy wasn't very good at that time. And mostly he would draw pictures and I'd get 2 or 3 words that would go with the picture, that kind of thing. And I thought that was all very interesting. And I was very grateful, even though I really didn't understand a lot of what I was being given. But I did ask him, I said, I said, is it possible for you to show up on the earth physically? And they said, well, yes, it is possible. That's not our natural state, but it is possible. And I said, gee, I would love for you to come visit us here on planet Earth. Acted like they would consider that. Okay.
Okay.
So about 3 months later, one night, my husband and I were sitting around the dining room table, and we both had a strange feeling, that a strange, different energy. And we both said, let's go out and look and see if we can find a place. So if your friends decide to come down and land, we can tell them, here's a good place. Okay.
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 All right. Okay. I just need to stop here for a second and say
Okay.
you have the coolest husband to go on this journey with you and be so open. Wow. You made the right decision to end the first relationship and move. Wow. Were you like around 30 or so when this happened?
No, I was 24, I think.
Yeah. Oh, the ripe old age of 24. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We lived in the Washington, D.C. area. I still worked at NIH. But anyway, we went out, we drove out in the country northwest of Washington. We ended up on a dirt road between some pasture fields, I'm going to say. We stopped the car and said, gee, this looks like it would be a good area. You could see the sky. And we said, well, since we're here, let's just take a moment. And he was looking out his window. I was looking out my window. And after a moment, I said, gee, honey, do you see anything? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. So I leaned across him, looked out his window, and up in the sky was this large, rather spherical light, okay,
Okay.
that was zigzagging in a very unusual pattern. And it would go up and it would zigzag. And as soon as I saw it, I felt a strong connection. Now, I had felt nervous driving out there while my husband had felt very calm. As soon as my husband saw it, he felt kind of nervous. But this big light came down and landed on the ground. And we both looked at it, and he immediately said, I think we better get out of here. And he
Okay.
started the car. It started, and we drove off with me hanging out the window.
Wait!
Yeah. Okay. So we went out the next day. We couldn't see any markings. We went out the next night with two friends who were highly reliable witnesses. I mean, one was a deputy sheriff, and we went out there to see if something would happen again. They did not have any large, this felt like a craft that I mentioned to you first.
Yes.
But instead, they sent down 3 spheres of light, about maybe, I'm going to say 18 inches in diameter, quite large,
Okay.
hung in the sky. We all 3 could walk all around them. Okay. They seemed to be some kind of remote communication device. And suddenly 2 of them just winked out, disappeared, and the third started rising, went higher, 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 and we all watched it and went up quite some distance, and then it winked out. That was an interesting experience, okay?
Interesting. I love your choice of words. That was an interesting experience.
Well, I'll tell you, that is a valuable choice of words.
Okay.
Because, and over the course of my life, I have had some experiences that are really, really far out beyond most people's imaginings. And what has helped me is to have the attitude of, isn't that interesting?
Yes.
Because there's a kind of neutrality about that.
Yes.
If you get too excited or too fearful, the experience won't happen, or it will stop. But if you can just stay at that open-minded kind of beginner's mind state of, isn't that interesting? A lot can flow.
I would just like to interject a personal experience to go along with what you just shared. This was about a month ago. As I was looking at my phone, something caught my eye on the left side of my peripheral vision. I looked over, and normally when I see stuff, it'll disappear. There was a shimmery mirror-like image. So it was silvery, it was shimmering, and I was able to look at it directly. And when I looked at it, it was like looking at anything else in my space. Like, oh, there's a picture. Oh, there's the TV. And then I saw that and I'm like, oh, of course. And of course, my cats were totally fine with it too. And I just have this knowing. And so I do believe that because I stayed in that place of neutrality and stayed balanced, I think if I had gone into a high, high, high or a low, 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 my energy would have just been, boop, it would have just not been a match. So I have personally experienced what you're talking about. And I agree. Okay. So that's a great choice of words. Thank you for educating on that.
Okay. After that experience, I shared it with a number of people. And what I learned pretty quickly was that it was not a good idea to share that, because either people would think you were really nuts. Something, what happened to Franceen? Or they would be afraid.
Yes.
So I did not share with many people what had happened at that point. But I shared it with my parents. They were kind of excited. They thought that was neat. And I'm really grateful for that. But overall, I didn't share it much. But increasingly, I had that desire in myself that I wanted to do some kind of work that was more associated with the paranormal or more spiritual, whatever. So I left my job at NIH. I had no plans at all, but a couple weeks after leaving the job, I picked up the phone and called a local metaphysical center in the DC area. It was called the ISIS Center, and introduced myself and asked if they might need any help. Well, the owner, bless her heart, she said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. She said, I've invited Uri Geller to come speak at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., and I need someone to do promotional work. Uri, are you familiar with Uri Geller?
I am not. The reason why my eyes got really big is because I was doing I think it was one of the Monroe meditations about a handful of years ago, maybe 6, 7 years.
Uh-huh.
I'd have to look it up. Well, I was in a deep, 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 deep state. In my head, loud as can be, I heard ISIS, and I had no clue who this was. I knew it was. I did some research really quickly, and then I quickly I have a golden, well, it's not gold, but it's a statue of Goddess Isis that's on my desk. And I've had experiences with that energy since then. So I just think it's so cool that the name of the center that you went to is ISIS, was the ISIS.
Yes, and I will mention this is your listeners probably aren't going to follow this, but since you've done the Starlines programs and we visit the galactic core, in many traditions it is said that the galactic core is the throne of Isis. I'll just share that with you.
I don't remember hearing that.
Now, I
Wow.
don't mention that because talking about ISIS isn't particularly a key part of the Monroe Institute um, philosophy or what we're really going for in that. But people do have contact.
There's a reason why I was drawn to you, Francine. There are no coincidences when we have these people. Anybody can be a teacher, but then when you have these connections where I know you, I know your energy. Okay, you were talking about, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the person that you asked me about.
Okay, this was 1973. Uri Geller is the Israeli psychic who was brought to this country by a man named Dr. Andrea Puharich, who was a psychic researcher, and taken out to Stanford, SRI International, Stanford Research Institute, to be studied. And they all say to this day he had the highest ESP scores of anyone they ever tested. But what he was known for was bending metals, bending spoons and all kinds of metals and all kinds of phenomena that occurred around him. Okay. And this was in 1973 really viewed to be contrary to the laws of physics, absolutely impossible. So I ended up spending over the course of that, spread out over a couple of months, 3 days with Uri Geller and his entourage, and saw all kinds of phenomena.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so that was really neat. But I had left NIH, and the truth of the matter is, I did do some traveling in Mexico, and I learned a lot of things during that period, but I wasn't creating any income. So I ended up going back to work at NIH, okay, which
Okay.
was a blessing in many ways, and I learned a lot. And actually, in my work there, by that point in time, I was working across all the institutes, had very interesting work. And in my professional circles, I was beginning to do some public talks on transforming organizations using some of the principles I was learning from my explorations. And so that was all fun. But eventually I left NIH and started my own training and consulting business. Now, along the way, because I wanted to know everything, I actually bought out a bookstore, a metaphysical bookstore that was going out of business, and just had hundreds of books. I love books. And although I sold many, I still have I have hundreds of books here in this house, and some of them are still from that period. Been, like you said, following the breadcrumbs. one thing that was really important for me, another technique or technology or process along the way, was breath work, which I highly recommend. Okay. And was very important in my life because for a number of years, I actually practiced as a what it at that time was known as a rebirthing. These days, people just say more breath work, and rebirthing evolved from Leonard Orr and Sandra Ray, some of those people before the days of holotropic breath work. These days, even online, there are many, many breathwork teachers. And I highly recommend for your listeners who want to expand in consciousness to get familiar with breath. Your breath, your breath is the connection between the inner and the outer worlds. And breath is spirit. And that's why when we talk about respiration, it comes from the word spirit. Inspiration, spirit. For me personally, that has probably been the single most important tool. That breath is the connection. There are a lot of different theories out there and ways of going about things these days, but no matter how you do it, from simple relaxation breath work or birthing breath work or yogic breath work, whatever, start to get really familiar with your breath and experiment.
Do you feel that that can help us with gaining altered states of consciousness or connecting with our inner guidance? What in particular?
Absolutely, all of that. It is an increase. It increases the basic life energy.
Did you ever get a sense of the beings that visited you at such a young age, you and your husband, and then the next day you saw the lights? Did you ever get a sense of, oh, this is this group or that group? I mean, did you ever get any sort of awareness of that or not really?
Initially, I told you about the hooded
Yes.
figures, okay? And I
Yes.
remember asking them at some point, where am I? Or where are you from? Or whatever. As I said, my telepathy wasn't that good. And the word I heard began with an R sound with a heavy emphasis. And it was 3 syllables. The last syllable was us. Okay.
Okay.
It took me a while to put together that they were saying Arcturus because I didn't have any knowledge of stars, or not much at that point in time. And they pronounced it with an accent on the R. And it wasn't really until I heard someone with a British accent refer to Arcturus that I realized that's what they were saying. Plus, by then I had some other hints, yeah. But the truth is, as you know, with Starlines, we visit many, many, many. We travel throughout the cosmos, well beyond this local part of our, solar system or local part of our galaxy, our local bubble, all through the Milky Way and all way, way, way beyond. So we meet many, many kinds of intelligences in creation. And so I've met many along the way and many helpers.
There is so much more that we don't maybe can understand. And it's not to put other beings onto a pedestal or a platform. I don't believe truly that's what it's for. It's just understanding that we are all energetic beings. And also, what I love about the programs that I've taken with you and some of the other programs is that I understand the importance of setting the intention of connecting with the highest possible vibrational frequency of love and light, connecting with my own inner wisdom, guidance, source, and angels, and anybody who has ever listened to what I share and what I channel. That's really, really important. So you're having these connections with other dimensional beings, frequencies. How did you get the downloads for, say, the program that I took with you recently, the Starlines program? How did that come about?
1986, I was invited to become a trainer at the Monroe Institute. At the time, I didn't have much interest in doing that because I had a brand new little son, and I had a very active business here in Florida where I live doing what I thought were some very important things. But
Yes.
my guidance said, Francine, we'd like for you to consider this, and we promise you'll be nurtured in the process. So I
Oh.
said, okay. Supposed to go for a training, trained to be a trainer there. The female trainer got very ill. So I was basically the trainer with my male companion that week. That was an interesting program because Whitley Strieber, who some of your viewers might know, was in that program. It was 2 weeks before his book Communion came out. So I've been a trainer for the Monroe Institute for many years. My guidance works with me and shows up in many, many, many different ways, moment by moment in my life. I designed the X27 program. Most of the guidance for that initially came to me through in meditation. For the first Starlines program, the guidance came while I was just sitting on the sofa watching TV.
So how does it come forward for you? Is it just like boom, you start getting all this information, or is there just like how are you discerning the information? How do you know that it's a download versus say you're thinking about it? Is it
Sometimes it just comes through like a blast.
okay?
Okay. Like on the first Starlines program, I forget what I was watching on TV, but it didn't have anything to do with that program. And the guidance came in with pictures and a few words. Okay. A lot of times my guidance comes in with pictures and a few words. I don't get lengthy paragraphs
Mm-hmm.
explaining things.
Mm-hmm.
Other times I will ask for a sign. You know, my guidance has always said to me over the years, please ask. Or Francine, we're so glad you finally asked. Okay. Because there are a lot of things that they don't feel they can, a lot of answers they can't give us because they wouldn't mean anything until we framed a question that they can hang some information on. So they always say, we're so glad you finally asked. And then related to that, as we were talking yesterday, it is so important, I think, if you have any doubt at all, and it's normal to have some doubts, but if you have any doubt, to ask for a sign, some kind of physical confirmation. People have all kinds of things that are signs for them. I do not have a consistent one sign fits all situations. I have a wide variety of signs that show up, but I like to have my signs be real physical. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for example, when I'd gotten the guidance to do the Starlines reunion program, which you mentioned that you participated in last year. When I got the guidance for that, I had some questions. So I was asking for a sign. I wanted confirmation that this is the way to go. I was up at Monroe at that week, and I woke up the next morning, and on my phone, on my cell phone, the homepage background had for years been a picture of my little dog Missy. And I woke up that morning and looked, and it had changed. I don't know how it changed. There was an image of a moving galaxy, and I have no record of ever having downloaded that image from anywhere. And that was the image on my phone that day. And it stayed there, and I never changed it until I, traded in phones. Um, so that was very physical. Also, that night there was a crop circle that showed up. And the crop circle was an alien type face with feathers, like a feather headdress,
Yes.
and that resembles one of my guides, actually, a periodic guide. So there aren't that many crop circles that have, I use the term alien, and I don't usually use that term at all,
Right.
but an extraterrestrial kind of face with a feather headdress. And I also took that as part of the confirmation, yes.
Where was that crop circle? Was that in the United States or was that
No,
in
it
the
was in England.
that was in England? Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a crop circle? Have you ever experienced the energy of a crop
I
circle?
have not been physically in a crop circle. As you know, Lisa, last year that was our intention to
We
go,
tried.
and we tried. And last year there were very few crop circles. And the day that we had planned to be visiting crop circles, there weren't any available for us to go into. But we did have our own little kind of miracle that week regarding crop circles.
This is a fascinating conversation. So, for those of you that are unfamiliar with what Francine and I are speaking about, the third sequence of the Star Alliance program is a reunion. And we were in the UK for that last year. And I just had, so talking about synchronicities and how things unfold, I had no idea I was going to take the Star Alliance 1 program last year. It just kind of fell into my lap and did that online. Next thing you know, I'm taking Star Alliance 2 a couple months later, and it happened to be an anniversary of the same exact week. I think it was 3 years prior. I had been in the Grand Canyon and had caught something on my phone that nobody saw with the naked eye. But then when I saw it, when I played it back, it was really cool. And I happened to be at the Monroe Institute when I had that anniversary of that experience. So while I was at that Star Alliance 2 experience there, I'd heard about the reunion and that it was going to be in the UK and that we would have the opportunity to go to Stonehenge. And a list a mile long, a wait list a mile long. But I thought, you know what? It can't hurt to put my name on the list. And I said to my team, if I'm supposed to be there, I trust that I'll be there. And sure enough, on the 4th of July, I got contacted by Andrea, the other coordinator, and I was in. And so we had the opportunity to go to Stonehenge and be in the inner circle. Even that was amazing because I wasn't supposed to, it was just a gamble whether I was going to even be able to be in the inner circle because of the requirements and that even happened. So the way that happened was amazing. And the energy in Stonehenge, it was so surreal. It was a surreal moment. So this is the trip that Francine is referring to, and that we were going to see, hoping to see crop circles at the same time. So I'll let you pick up here where we were.
Okay, but so we didn't get to see any crop circles,
Nope.
but we did go to Stonehenge.
Yes.
And they let everybody in our group in at the same time, which was contrary to their regular policy. We were so grateful. And while we were in the circle, we did a ceremony. And my guidance had said for the ceremony, we wanted to keep it short and no drums and bells and all that something. And they said, use movement and make a picture, sort of like a marching band that we would see on a football field, how it goes through different things. So I did, and we did a ceremony with movements that told a story. And it was fairly quick and fairly easy enough for everyone to follow along and do it. And everyone felt very high and grateful that we did it. Okay. Well, 2 nights later, or afternoons later, we see the report of a new crop circle. As I said, there were very few crop circles.
Yep.
In England last summer. And it was the 8-8 Lions Gate.
Yes.
And there was a new crop circle, and we showed a picture of it. And I remember when we did, the whole group looked at it, and most people seemed to think that the crop circle was a representation of the movements we had made in our ceremony.
Yes.
All of the elements of our ceremony were in that crop circle. And people were just kind of astounded, including me, that we could easily see that connection. Well, something that was even more astounding to me was that crop circle stayed on the ground for 2 weeks without the farmer mowing it. And 2 weeks later, I was conducting another program, a virtual program online, and we saw an image of that crop circle, and it had been modified the night before. There were several other elements added to it, which made it look even more like our ceremony.
Oh.
And in the center of the circle was a ring of stones. Now, I have never seen a crop circle with a ring of stones in the center. um, which seemed to be even more confirmation that we had
Oh,
interacted with whoever the circle makers are. And,
you
you
shared
know,
a couple of crop circles here.
yes, that's how it originally appeared.
Okay, that is so cool.
Okay. And then 2 weeks later, it was modified. It was added to.
Okay.
This is what it looked like after it was modified. And you need to see some of the close-up pictures, but there's a ring of
Oh,
stones right
okay.
in the center. I did get a clear message that the circle makers really want us to come back this year. So we're going back and we'll see what happens this
I
time.
cannot wait to hear all about that trip. I was unable to make it this year, but and that gives, obviously other people an opportunity to take that spot, but that experience was just, it was surreal. I had no idea I'd have the opportunity to be there, and just the energy, the amazing people that were there. It's things that happen. We also got to experience Avebury, which was really cool. It just, so much history, so many
Mhm.
things that have happened as a result of that trip that I can't
Yeah.
even don't even have
Oh,
time to share
wow.
here, but definitely helped. I would have to say that these programs that I attended, especially these last ones with you, Francine, have just shifted my energy. And I felt like perhaps because I was ready, and has really helped expand and grow my work as well. So that, whatever it is, whether it's meditation programs such as the ones you've developed, that really encourage us to tap into these realms and expanded states of consciousness with balance. It's just fascinating how things can unfold. Really, truly.
Yes,
Wow.
and I really, obviously I'm not here representing the Monroe
No.
Institute today, but I do want to put in a plug for the Institute because I have spent 40 years conducting workshops and designing workshops there, and which has been a blessing because I have met so many wonderful people and been able to work all over the world. Truly, I've made, I think, 28 trips to Japan conducting programs and all through Europe, as well as here in the United States. Bob Monroe became famous for writing a book called Journeys Out of the Body that was published in 1971. I was fortunate in that I was a trainer there for 10 years before Bob made his transition in 1995. There is an excellent movie that just came out last week, and I'm going to mention it because I watched it last night. You can watch it on Gaia or Amazon Prime. It's called Consciousness Connections, and it's an excellent review of parapsychological research through the years and where we are today, um, and how our scientists are finding that in the field of consciousness, we are all connected. And it is that natural connection that allows so much of some of these things we call phenomena to occur. But the second half of the movie uh, talks a lot about the Monroe Institute, has some wonderful video of Bob when he was alive, talking about different things and the old, how the Institute got started and what it's about today. And they did a really nice job. So rather than me talk about the Institute and their technology, which is a sound based technology, a highly valuable, I would recommend that you watch the movie. And
Thank you.
it's, up to date. Like I said, it just came out last week. In addition, the Monroe Institute has a YouTube channel and a web page, monroeinstitute.org. The Institute has been around for about 50 years now, and is quite active not only in the US, but internationally as well, and highly respected and credible. I feel, in terms of my work with the Institute, my whole purpose is to allow people to discover more about who and what they really are. And who we are is far more than we were ever taught, certainly as children, and more than most people can even imagine. So at this point, but we want to stimulate your imagination. I talked about breath as being powerful for expanding, sound, powerful, words, affirmations. I know many of you affirmations or intention, using your intention, whether it's to create something or to ask questions or to whatever. Those are all important tools to begin to work with, knowing who you are. If I could tell you one thing, it would be that I think the beginning, the middle, the end, and every step along the way is ultimately about being willing to love yourself. And it is this energy of love, especially as you learn to love yourself, that allows, and by self, I mean with a big S, not just the personality, but the being you are. And as you do that, it allows more of the facets, the aspects of this greater being to reveal themselves and be integrated, and you can continue to expand and grow. And I would say there truly are no limits. Some people find it real easy to love others, and that's okay and good and necessary. But if you're not loving yourself, they're not going to feel your love. So remember to love yourself, and that will allow the expansion. So love.
Thank you, Francine. That's absolutely beautiful. You have brought forth so many. I really wish we could spend a whole nother, I think we're going to have to maybe have another conversation later this year. Your wisdom, the knowledge, the beautiful messages that you have brought forth, the synchronicities that you don't even realize what you brought forward during this interview for me, and I'm sure other people are going to resonate with. And especially the most important thing is love, loving ourselves and the big self. And because as we show up and loving ourselves and being able to clear what needs to be cleared, we're able to raise our vibrational frequency. We're able to show up for not only ourselves, but for others. And it's just, we're all energetic beings. And as
we're all connected, this is such an important concept too.
For me, there is no greater honor than to be part of this connectedness and to be part of the love and to be of service. And there is no way that, for example, what I can do to happen if I wasn't aware of the fact that we are all connected. And so I really, really appreciate your coming on here and sharing your journey and sharing your experiences and just wonderful words of advice. So I just thank you so much, Francine. I truly, truly appreciate you. Any other final thoughts that we haven't covered here today that you wanted to add? Or
I'll add one more thought. Love, as I said, is the beginning, the middle, every step along the way. But I think it's a good idea to train yourself in terms of asking questions. One little question that has served me well over the years is, could there possibly be more?
Oh, I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
You will have times along the way that's where you experience great wholeness and completion and oneness and unity, and it feels so, so good. And it's wonderful, wonderful, the oneness. And yet, could there possibly be more? Well, it opens the door to possibly discovering.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
Francine, thank you so much for your time today. And for those of you who are listening, please remember, until next time, we are fully supported, we are fully protected, and we are fully loved. Thank you. Love and blessings.
Thank you.